Well, hello and welcome to today's episode of the Power of Your Mind podcast. You are listening to episode number 171. I'm Victoria Gallagher, Law of Attraction hypnotist and number one best-selling author of Practical Law of Attraction. Align yourself with the manifesting conditions and successfully attract your desires. I'm also the founder of hiptalk.com and HypnoCloud apps, which gives you access to over 500 hypnosis recordings right in the palm of your hand. So be sure to download that app from the app stores today. And today I have a very special guest with me, Frances Yahia. And I did pronounce that correctly, right?
Yes.
Good. Frances Yahia has a PhD in educational leadership and mental health, a MPH, a MS in dietetics, and she is also a licensed mental health counselor and dietitian, a professional archetypal astrologer, Akashic Records reader, and a shaman. And she can be found at dryahia.com website. That's www.dryahia.com. And you'll be able to find that in the show notes for today's episode. And she also is the host of the Mistress of Subconscious podcast. She also has a YouTube channel with lots of metaphysics, spirituality, symbolism, mythology, universal laws, and depth psychology. And she has on her Patreon page a spiritual starter kit. We'll talk about that at the end of the episode. But she's also the author of The Seven Gates, the 7 Steps Beyond Self-Awareness, Witch Birth, Ceremonies, and Rituals for Gods and Goddesses. And so today, Frances is going to be sharing some of her insights on how to heal subconscious wounds. So welcome to the show, Frances.
Thank you for having me, Victoria.
Thank you so much for being here. And I also understand that you practice or you're familiar with Ayurvedic medicine, which we were just having a little fun conversation. I just want to get it out of the way because if you're watching this on YouTube right now, you're seeing what I refer to as my old lady hairs. Okay. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., they'll be gone, gone, gone. I never, ever show up like this. But apparently, I shouldn't be embarrassed by this because, as you explain it better than I do. So maybe you could share what you shared with me, just as a fun little way to introduce yourself.
Absolutely. So, Ayurvedic medicine is a medical system, the most ancient medical system, and it's the medicine of India. And everything boils down to 3 main sort of energies: Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. We all have all 3, but we have primarily 1 or 2. So that streak of gray is actually pretty notorious for people that are Pittas. It's the element of fire and water. So it says that you're fiery and passionate and spicy. So I absolutely love it. I think it's really great.
And that really does define me. I am a fire person. I'm a Leo,
Oh, okay.
too. So you're into astrology, so you know that I'm ruled by the sun.
Absolutely. So there's
And
your
yeah,
fire. Yeah. So for
yes.
your listeners, there's 3: Vata, which is more air and ether. There's Pitta, which is fire and water, and Kapha, which is water and earth. So it's how much elements you have of that combination in your body. It dictates dietary habits, exercise habits, sleep habits. And so the Ayurvedic system is based on those elemental structures for each individual person.
I love that. And, I have to admit, I have not been studying up on my Ayurvedic medicine, but I did a while back. I was really reading a lot of Deepak Chopra, and I just remember all of that stuff was so cool. Just really learning about, the different. Oh, he would talk about like the different types of tastes that you need to incorporate into your diet every day. And, if you are one of these different types, you tend to gravitate towards certain tastes. And It was really, really interesting information. So definitely, you gave me a really good, cozy reminder of when I was listening to all that. But today, we're actually going to be talking about some of your other cool things that you're, an expert in, which is about the subconscious mind and about the wounds that we have in our subconscious minds, and what may be causing some of the blocks that we might have to manifesting, I would say, are there in our subconscious mind. And
Absolutely.
so, yeah, so let's just get into your story a little bit. Just give us just a tiny little bit of how you came to understand the processes of the subconscious mind and healing wounds.
So, just a little bit about my story and how I got on the spiritual journey. I was actually born into a cult, was in
Mm.
that for 33 years, and I left. I then found another teacher, was with him for about 4 years, left him, and really felt unsupported by the universe, as if God had failed me. And so I started seeking and I found astrology. Astrology answered a lot of questions. But when I went for my first astrology reading, my teacher said two things. One thing I knew and one thing I had never heard before. The thing I knew is that I would be divorced, and I was. And the other was that I could be in charge of my own life. I had never heard those words. Having been in a cult, you have this idea that you need a mediator between you and God, or you in the universe, or you in the spirit realm. And that's absolutely false. So when I started astrology, I realized it's the absolute best tool for self awareness. It's literally you on a piece of paper, and you can see a lot of your subconscious traumas on that. You can see your archetypes, you can see your entire mind, transits and patterns that are activated with the planetary cycles. So it was a really fascinating study. Then I started reading the Akashic Records, which is really such an amazing tool to connect to your spirit guides and develop your intuition. I later found shamanism. And one day I went for a reading, and my husband at the time said, "How was it?" I said, "Well, it's the worst reading I ever had and the best reading I ever had." And the worst reading because it wasn't really that good. And the best is because I realized that I had all the tools within me. And at that point, I started practicing and reading astrology charts and Akashic records for people and developing my own spiritual techniques based on what I had studied and learned. So I guess it was that point that I realized I was the teacher I had been looking for all along. So I went on a mission to teach people to not be engaged in coercive techniques, reliant on spiritual teachers or gurus. Yes, we're part of the journey, we're part of your path. We can perhaps give you some nuggets of information that help you, but ultimately it's your journey and it's the way you need to do it. So I think that a lot of reliance on teachers and gurus are very coercive techniques. And my goal is to help people get away from that reliance and find self-reliance in the spirit realm.
I love that. And I love that you said that you were the teacher that you've been looking for all along. And that is so true. Just let that sink in, because truly, yes, you may need direction. You may need somebody to take your hand and point you in the right direction, or help you to understand that the power is within you, help you to guide you to tap into that power that is within. But there is nothing outside of you that is going to dictate or run your life. You have it all within you. It's a completely 100% in your control. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's sad to think that we give so much of the external power. Even I just wrote this book called Spiritual Adulting, where I take you literally from womb to tomb, your entire spiritual process
Mm.
guided by the universe, age by age. And even our most difficult moments, even our crises that we think that we're abandoned or something is happening to us because of external forces, is all created from the subconscious, archetypally, a planet named Pluto. So even the need for crisis to create chaos in our lives so that we can make room for spirit or change is all divinely guided from within.
That's amazing. Yes, love it. I love that. So let's dive in to the subconscious mind because that's what you really deal with. And of course, myself as a hypnotherapist for the last 22 years, I can answer the question i- quite succinctly what the subconscious mind is. But let's hear it from you on, what is the subconscious mind and how does the subconscious develop?
So I have a four-step theory on how the subconscious develops. It's actually at the moment of conception is when the subconscious develops, and I'll go through the four steps. But actually, most of us think that we're making conscious choices, but 99% of our choices are ruled by the subconscious. So if we don't understand our subconscious mind, how it develops, how it impacts us, we're sort of living blindly. So
Mhm.
the first step is at the moment of conception. At the moment of conception, your parents, when they conceive you, they give you your low level consciousness. Every one of us is born with a low level consciousness. Our job here, our soul's purpose, is to raise that consciousness level. At that moment, the entire subconscious develops. In my book, The Seven Gates, I talk about two buckets, the good buckets and the bad buckets. All of the so-called good qualities of mom and dad become the good buckets that we like, and all of the bad becomes the subconscious or the shadow that we suppress. So that's the first stage. This is where we sort of have our conception story or our origin story, and we're given all of that. The next stage, which I think is probably the most crucial in terms of repeating patterns and behaviors that are detrimental, is the womb. In the womb, we get our conditional version of love.
Mm.
So we were told two very big lies. We were told that our parents love us unconditionally. That has never been nor will ever be the case. That's an inside job. That is a purpose of a lifetime. And the second lie we were told is that our parents meet our needs. We are actually here to meet our parents' needs. So that one's a ha ha for sometimes a lot of people like, oh, wow. So there's four unmet needs. Every single one of us has all four. The main one is love because we were never loved unconditionally. So we're seeking love in our patterns, in our behaviors, in our relationships. The first one is safety, security. Most of us did not feel safe, not because the home wasn't safe or we didn't have great families, but we weren't really sure what was going to set our parents off. We really didn't know how we were going to be responded to in a situation. So it kept us very unsafe. So safety and security needs. The second set of needs are protection needs. I say often that we cook, clean, and counsel our mothers because we're there to sort of meet their needs instead of vice versa. Third one, and the big one I see in practice, is validation needs. If I have XYZ, money, academic achievement, the perfect child, the perfect body, whatever it is that you're seeking, then I will be worthy. And of course, the fourth is love. So these unmet needs keep us in what I call child or child script. So I'll talk about that in a moment with the fourth level of the subconscious. So in the womb, what we get is a shadow love language. Mom is living her life. In the womb, we assume that whatever she's living or feeling externally is love. So if she's arguing in conflict with a boss, a loved one, we think, oh, conflict is love. If she's working until the moment her water breaks, we think, oh, hard work is love. And that's how we develop this shadow love language that then is how we use coercively and manipulatively to meet our own needs as adults, because we never get out of the psychology of the womb. We also think that the womb is a symbiotic relationship when it's not. It's actually a parasitic relationship. Our needs are not getting met in there. We think we're sort of getting fed, but what is the food that we're being taught? And that's how we sort of live in our life, thinking that that's the way we need to get our needs met. The third stage of the subconscious is the actual transition process out of the womb into the world, whether it's a vaginal birth or a C-section. There's trauma that is actually recorded in the subconscious saying, the way I enter the world is how I must transition into every other phase of life. And we actually have to learn how to do it differently. So for instance, I was birthed, no anesthesia, very fast and furious. That's how I moved into all transitions, and I had to stop that. So we have to learn to sort of rewrite that. It's also transitions that help us prepare for the greatest transition, which is death. So all transitions in our life are recorded in our subconscious as death. And we live them as such because when we're going through the vaginal canal or being birthed, we think we are dying because we're leaving this supposed symbiosis into this cold perpetrator type world. So that's very marked in our spiritual development when we transition as if it's a death. And then the fourth stage of the subconscious development is where we get our personal mythology. It happens between 0 and 7. Every single one of us between 0 and 7 have some moment where mom looked at us, that's not accepted here, or dad yelled at us, or some adult said, no, put that away. At that moment, we have a program of, I am not enough, I am not worthy, I am not lovable. Even though it started at the moment of conception, it's recorded in the conscious mind and the subconscious from 0 to 7, and this becomes your story. This is the story that now you live and repeat throughout your life. And you say, oh, at 2, at 3, at 6, something happened, and I repeat that story over and over and over again. So those are the 4 stages. At that 0 to 7, I call it a personal mythology because now you have the characters in your story, the location, all of the details, and you will recreate that exact story throughout your life with the same characters, the same exact characters over and over. It may not be mom and dad, it might be husband and your child, but it's the same roles, and you will recreate that same story over and over again until you learn to come into sort of what I call the teenager pause, learn to take breaths, make conscious choices, free will kicks in here, and break that vicious cycle of sort of the fight or flight and the limbic system, adrenals, releasing cortisol, all of this fight or flight nonsense. And we actually start living as adults and making conscious choices to change behavior, transmute consciousness.
That is very profound. I'm getting a little echo coming out your computer now, but I just want I'm just acknowledging, like I'm I'm just sitting here in awe over everything that you just shared because it actually makes I have not heard it put exactly into those terms, but it makes so much sense. And this misinformation that we've had about how we think that we've been thinking our parents love us unconditionally. Can you speak to that just a little bit more on why we have why we have been going around with this idea in our minds that that we're being loved unconditionally, and you also mentioned that we're here really to serve our parents' needs. Can you speak to that? Go into that just a little bit more?
Sure. Can you hear me better
I can.
with
I
the
can.
microphone?
Yeah, this
Okay.
is great.
So it's sort of like a myth, as many myths. If mom and dad chose to have you, then they love you, they take care of you, they feed you, they change your diaper. And we sort of interpret this as unconditional love. But it's impossible because your parents don't love themselves unconditionally. They can't possibly love you unconditionally. So, one of the things I speak about is being birthed on an impure thought. So, at the moment of conception, we're actually birthed on an impure thought. Let's say dad didn't close the deal that morning at work and he's frustrated, or mom is tired. Whatever's going on in their subconscious, in their life, remember, it's low vibration. So, whatever that low vibration is, then becomes your level of consciousness. So, it can't be that they love you unconditionally, because if not, your entire journey here in the earthly realm would be for naught. So there's a great story in the Kabbalah I share in my Seven Gates book of the puzzle maker. And it's a puzzle maker who makes a puzzle every day for the kids in the neighborhood. And the kids get very excited to get the puzzle. But one day the puzzle maker gives them a puzzle that's intact. And the kids are like, what is this? And he's like, it's the most beautiful creation. And he's like, the kids are like, but this is no fun. The fun is finding the pieces and putting it together. So if your parents would have given you perfection, A, your soul wouldn't need a body because you would have no karma to burn. Your only purpose of being in a body is to burn karma and to raise consciousness. Once you've sort of reach that cycle to end some sorrow, which is the cycle of life, death, and rebirth, then you don't have to come back into a body anymore. So you wouldn't come back. You wouldn't need to be here. And then what fun would it be to discover yourself, to find your sort of diamond within and find your own journey? So I think just as a myth, assuming that parents chose to have us and take care of us and feed us and nurture us is viewed as unconditional love. And for those that haven't had healthy childhoods, I think they can really buy into that. With my clients that have had really nice, loving homes, they have a little bit more difficulty. And when we start removing the veils or going down to those impure thoughts, we realize, oh, wow, we weren't loved unconditionally. And it wasn't our parents' job. Bert Hellinger, who's the father of family constellation, said, your parents gave you life, and that was enough. The moment they gave you life, they gave you a body, they gave you thoughts, they gave you a consciousness level. What else? Now the rest is yours. That's your job. So spiritually, we're responsible for our children till 14, legally till 18. But spiritually, once 14 hits, you're no longer under your parents' spiritual umbrella. You're on your own to discover your own path and find the teacher within. So that's
Wow.
part of the myth of unconditional love. And I'm sorry, what
So
was the second question?
it sounds like it was all by design, that we come out wounded, but the wounds are really intentional. They're intended to have us grow into our spiritual selves.
Yes, the wounds are very intentional. So the accumulation of all of the karma of all of our past lives is called sanchita karma. In a lifetime, you only get one thread of that bag of karma. That's called prabha karma. So when you choose your parents, you're not choosing the physical parents, you're choosing the vibration linked to that karma that you come to burn. So you needed that exact circumstance, those exact parents to show you exactly what to do and what not to do. So those bad buckets that I mentioned earlier become your shadow, you suppress. But actually, a lot of the work I do with clients is to take out the shadow so we can look at the buckets, because the buckets, the bad buckets specifically, teach us exactly what we have to own in ourselves that we dislike of our parents so that we can learn to love ourselves. It's a little ironic, but it's the darkness that we have to embrace, that we have to love. And we have to thank our parents for that low level consciousness and those gifts of the shadow or the bad buckets so that we can indeed become whole.
Amazing. So how do we begin to grow into spiritual adults?
Okay, so the first thing is we have to understand our value system. So I have a statement that is judgments are confessions and they're great. We've been
Mm.
taught, we've been taught, oh, I don't want to judge. Oh, I hate to judge. No, judge. Every time I hear your judgment, I can link it to your value system. So this is what happens. Your parents give you a value system and they're doing it a certain way, and you're probably not here to do it the exact same way, but shift a little. But instead of looking at it and uncovering that impure thought, or those desires or emotions or thoughts that you have, you suppress it. That becomes the shadow. That actually is what runs your life. So you think you're behaving consciously, but it's the subconscious, specifically the shadow aspects and those bad buckets, those things you deem bad in your parents, that actually run your life until you bring them to the light. So the first thing is to identify these buckets and these shadow aspects, and they're linked to your values. So if you hear someone, for instance, talking about how hard they work, how hard they work, how hard they work, and they judge someone who's lazy, what they're doing is actually confessing that they have what I call a thief that robs your peace of mind of sloth or laziness. So it's always the opposite. It's what I call the 0 to 100. And the truth, as per the universal law, is always in the middle, what I call the 48 to 52. So we first have to kind of recognize that we live either in 0 or 100, exactly like our parents, or the exact opposite. So these 0 to 100 swings are judgments, and they're linked to our value system. And until we can identify our values, we won't really be able to start on the spiritual adulting path. So one of the first things I do with clients is have them pick their first top 2 values, and it cannot be family.
Mm.
So any wonder why it's not family?
Well, because that's where we were initially wounded, and so that's not really gonna contribute to, or maybe because we have a lot of judgment or unconditional love going on with our or non-unconditional love going on with our family, as you say.
Yes. So what happens is, so I'll just kind of chime in with the story of Jesus, which is probably a story everyone knows. Jesus was born in a manger. The manger is actually related to a cluster of stars that's called Praesepe, and it's called a beehive cluster. So in our family that gave us our thoughts, our emotions, our desires, and our low-level consciousness is equatable to like a honeypot. And consciousness can only be raised by getting out of that honeypot. Now imagine dipping a diamond, which is what you are, in a honeypot and trying to separate the granules of honey. It's practically impossible. That's what family is, a value system. Not that it's not important, does. We're blinded, we stay in low-level consciousness, we link back to our parents as what I call gods. And so we need to dethrone our parents, we need to individuate, and we need to become our own personal God, which you as a Leo can totally understand. We have to become the sun of our solar system. As
Mhm.
children, we think our parents are gods. So during the individuation process, the biggest thing is to identify your top 2 values. So most people, believe it or not, have a lot of trouble with this. They may not have trouble with saying honesty or integrity or hard work, but what they have trouble with is part 2. Can you define it in measurable terms?
Yes. And measurable is extremely important because how do you know if you're getting that value or that need? So are values, would you say values connected to your needs? Or your needs connected to
Absolutely.
your values? So how
Yes.
do you know if you're getting your need met if you can't measure it?
Exactly. And the thing is, and no one likes to hear this, it is absolutely nobody's job to meet your needs. It's an inside job. And
Mhm.
that's where we go wrong. This is where the
Mhm.
subconscious has a heyday. So in my book, I have 7 steps. It's 7 steps beyond self awareness. Awareness is only the first step. I have this thing called a band aid model. A is awareness. Real change happens with integration, and then when you do it differently. So you need to have awareness though. So what happens is every single person, place, thing, or situation that causes you any difficulty on a scale of 1 to 10 is representative of your mother or your father. So
I
that's the
I
first question.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think we choose our relationships based on that wounding, right?
Absolutely.
Because we kind of go around with these scars, these wounds, and I'm really into Harville Hendrix' work. I'm not sure if you're familiar with his book, but he talks about your Imago partner.
Oh, yes, exactly. So that
Yeah.
mirror, that's actually step 2 of my model. So
Oh, okay.
the reason I have clients ask any situation from 1 to 10, and I'll explain that in a moment, why is mom or dad, is
Mhm.
because the moment you can identify dropping your fork or breaking a nail or getting into a car accident as mom or dad, you're immediately positioned as child. And the moment you're child, your need has to be met. It's a negative feedback loop. It's a unhealthy psychological homeostasis. So if you were hungry and you saw someone with a piece of bread, you'd push them out of the way and take the bread, but you'd be satisfied for 3-4 hours. Your unmet needs are never satisfied. This is 24/7. Every single thought, every single situation is an opportunity to get my needs met. And that's how we go through life as children, basically begging and screaming to get our needs met. But this goes back to the womb. It's sneaky, it's conniving, it's coercive, it's passive aggressive, it's manipulative. I'm going to pretend to meet your needs, Victoria, because secretly I'm trying to get my needs met. And this is how we show up in the world as children, having this sort of subconscious agreement. I'm going to pretend to meet yours, you pretend to meet mine, and nobody's needs are ever met. So it's a very, very unhealthy process. So the question of just asking, is this mother or father, sets you up in your mind as, oh, I'm in child. Now I can actually make a conscious choice to change. There's other steps, but that's immediate. So why does the subconscious not understand 1 to 10? You could break your nail and get upset, or you can have the disaster of your lifetime. The subconscious does not differentiate. It has no differentiation process. If you want a piece of bread, if you need a fork to eat, or if your leg just got cut off. It just wants its needs met. It does not care. So sometimes when I break this down for clients, they're like, dropping the fork, the subconscious thinks is the exact same as the drama of my life. Yes. So we're
That
constantly creating chaos to get
that
our needs
is
met.
wow, that is amazing. It makes a lot of sense though. I mean, because numbers and that intensity, I mean, it's kind of in a way it's a logical thing because you're quantifying it. And the subconscious mind essentially it doesn't quantify things. Is that
Right. And it goes
essentially
back,
what you're saying?
it's exactly that. Because what happens is at that moment where you got your personal mythology from 0 to 7, something happened. You're at a restaurant, your mom looked at you and said, put that away. We don't behave that way here. You understood, I'm not lovable, needs not met, I'm not worthy. Every opportunity on a scale of 1 to 10 reminds you you're not worthy, that you're not lovable. And I need to get my parents to come run down the stairs and say, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean that, and apologize. And that's never happening. So the subconscious doesn't care what situation you create, because we create it all to get that need met. And we're still waiting for mom and dad to come running to our rescue and saying, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. You're great. You're so loved.
So
And that is never met.
what happens if like this uh, like opens up this whole can of worms here, right? Like what we're talking about, I can hear my audience kind of saying this sounds like a lot of work.
It
It
is. I'm not going to lie.
sounds like I got a lot of, so couldn't we just go through life with these wounds and pretend to offer and receive unconditional love, and couldn't we just get by without getting our needs met, or the way that like we've been getting along
Well,
this far in life? Couldn't we just like
we can.
walk around
We
with
can.
blinders on and live in denial?
We can, and most people do. But this is what's linked to the birthing process. The birthing process is a transition. We have 3 major transitions in our life. Birth, obviously, when we enter the world. Our sexual transition, and whatever you deem as your first sexual experience, is linked to your exact birthing process. And last is your death, when you leave the body.
Mhm.
During life, you have these small deaths that I call skinny cows. And we get these opportunities every 7 years This is to try to help those swings of 0 to 100 that I mentioned earlier stop and get you to a more sort of rhythmic, balanced state of the 48 to 52. If those small steps, those small debts, those skinny cows do not get your attention, you call it God, you call it the universe, you call it the burglar, you create a massive sort of equal to your birth transition story, and you create some sort of crisis in your life to get permission to look deeper into your spiritual life, to break away from the delusion, what I call toxic water theory. The womb is toxic waters. It's parasitic. It's not symbiotic. The only symbiotic relationship you can have is with yourself and your connection to the universe. So we often need a massive crisis where we lose it all, we blow up our life, to have permission from a societal perspective to now go in and do the deeper work. So you can stay in delusion, and even after a crisis, many people go back to that. But we will create a massive transition to detach, to have a sudden ending, to have a loss, for permission to now tell the world, I just got cancer, my husband left me, I got into a car accident, whatever it is that you've created to lead you to your next stage of spiritual adulting.
So is doing this work, I'm curious, is doing this work a detour from
Yes.
having to eventually, so we know that, we're driving down the spiritual path, right? And, we can either take this detour and do the work to heal our wounds, or we can just keep driving mindlessly, numb, and however we've been doing it, just kind of pretending, just kind of going through the process, going through the motions. But if we keep going that way, we're also ultimately going to get into a crash. Like, that we're going to crash, we're going to burn, we're going to have to face our demons, we're going to have to face those wounds, and we're going to have to be presented with something that's going to force us to heal.
Yeah, so there's a few things. We are all guaranteed some spiritual growth. Just like biologically we grow when we get older, spiritually you will grow. It might be the size of a raisin, but you will grow something spiritually. It's programmed in you.
Mm-hmm.
So some people get to 50, 60, and they're like, well, it hasn't been working for me. Maybe I should try something else. They have no consciousness around it necessarily. They don't call it spiritual work. They have some behavior change, and that per se leads to some change in their life. We want to do this consciously. So I'll give you an example. I had a client the other day, and I said, well, you're going to have a Pluto transit, which is one of these sort of massive crashes, to use your metaphor. And you can break your arm, or your husband can leave you destitute. I did not know her story. And she's like, that's a pretty dramatic difference. I said, well, if you plan and you do the inner work, the shadow work, and confront your demons, like you said, then you're going to have something happen. And it might be minor, like your arm breaks. Or if you don't look at this and you continue to suppress, then exactly that. The crash is coming. And when I asked her about her story, I said, what's the link here to money and marriage? She's like, my mother's husband, who was very wealthy, dropped dead and left us destitute. So we are repeating our parents' story as a loyalty. So bringing awareness to that, owning our own value systems, sort of leaving home, as is the metaphor of the honeypot, and sort of dusting off that diamond so that we can have our soul's purpose, can help avoid the crash. Does not mean that everything is going to be avoided. We are in a body. Pain is sort of inherent in having an earthly existence, but it's not going to be severe when we have consciousness around it. The other thing is, most people will not set boundaries, say no, speak truth until, quote unquote, the universe gives them an opportunity. And now I'm sick. I can't attend to your needs. I have to attend to mine. So we create these sort of big explosive issues in our life, oftentimes leading to illness. So we now have permission to say, Victoria, I'm sorry, I can't come over to dinner tonight. I'm not feeling well. This is acting up. And we have to get away from that. We don't have to use illness and disasters and the phrase I hear a lot, I lost it all, as an excuse to finally connect with our spiritual lives, set boundaries, say no, have self-love, seek unconditional love for ourselves, self-worth. So my mission is to hope to bring awareness and provide tools. And I have tons of free tools on my website so that people could do this work consciously, raise consciousness, and not have to lose it all. You're already going to have something happen to you, but it could be actually quite minor when you do this work with awareness. And that's the spiritual adulting.
You know what? That makes so much sense. And that's very comforting to know that we ultimately can take control of this process to minimize the repercussions of this spiritual journey. That if we go through it blindly, without addressing what our needs are, and our wounds are, and ultimately, fixing ourselves, is that an appropriate way to?
I mean, I'm not a big believer that we heal them per se. I like more like scarification, kind of like a scar that gets a little bit, lighter and lighter as the years go by. It's still there. I say if 20% of the time you show up as child and 80% you're a spiritual adult, we won. We're good. Because you are going to get sick and you are going to want your kids to meet your need, or your spouse. And these are natural sort of being in a world, in an earthly body sort of necessity. But with consciousness, you can minimize that. And the thing is that you then shift the entire system. You allow your partner to show up as an adult for himself or herself. Your children to then, instead of what I call castrating, feed and fly, we castrate our children. When they have to meet our needs, we don't let them do their spiritual journey. And that's ancestral and transgenerational trauma. So if we can shift the whole system of everybody being responsible for self, asking clearly for what we need, then all of a sudden there's clarity, there's truth, and we really can minimize a lot of the nonsense in our lives.
Can you give us just a glimpse of what a technique or a strategy or a tool that you might use, to help a person to, to just begin to begin this process? Like what would be the very first thing that they would, you know, um, that they would do to begin the process of healing?
So I have something that I call a three-prong approach. So I get a spiritual TED Talk, I'll explain, then a spiritual STD, and then a spiritual striptease. Okay. The
Whoa.
spiritual
These are
TED Talk.
great names. Spiritual TED Talk.
The
Number one,
spiritual
spiritual
Talk.
TED Talk.
First thing, you've got to know your thoughts. T is thoughts, E is emotions, and D is desires. If we do not know where our thoughts are coming from, the impure thoughts that come from the moment of conception, what they're sort of dictating in our life, we cannot move forward. I'll just kind of chime in on the others and I'll go back to thoughts in a minute. The spiritual STD is the individuation process. When you sort of leave home, you leave the manger, the low-level consciousness, the honeypot. You individuate, you say, think, and do the same. Don't say something and think, oh, this is the last place I want to be. Don't go. You create karma, you self-betray. You go right back to low-level consciousness. And the spiritual striptease is getting down and dirty with your demons, or what I call the thieves that rob your peace of mind. Lust, gluttony, envy, sloth, delusion, all of
The
these.
seven deadly
Sins. And there's a few more, but they all kind of collapse into the same. And every tradition has these. That's actually linked to the moment of conception and why you chose your parents. That's actually the impure thought that you're holding in a vault for mom and dad. Don't let anyone know we really have this value system. Shh, keep it quiet. That's the crux of the wound at the moment of conception. So I have a 12 truths to the spiritual path. And you mentioned earlier my Patreon. It's a spiritual starter kit. So whether you're on this journey and want assistance or you're just starting, the first thing that you will have to combat every moment for the rest of your life is your thoughts. They do not stop and they dictate everything. This isn't meditation where you just observe the thought and let it go. That's step 10. We are in step 1, the truth of thought. What are you thinking? Why are you thinking it? What does it say about you? So going back to the 7 gates, mother, father, second step, this is sort of the shortcut. What don't I like about XYZ person, place, thing, or situation? The judgment is a confession and it's great. It will tell you your value system if you're honest, and it'll bring you back to that impure thought. And the third question, which I think is a game changer for many people, is why did I create this situation or person or place or whatever happening? And what need does it serve? Or what does it prove about me? So when people start saying, well, it proves I'm worthless, it proves I'm not enough, it proves I'm fat, it proves I'm lazy, then they start to link their unmet need, their unworthiness, their lack of self-love to the thought which was given to them at the moment of conception. It starts to become like a threaded, necklace.
So
And then we go into other steps.
And as you go through these 12 steps, not to be confused with the traditional 12-step program, but your
these are
12 steps,
truths.
12 truths,
Yes.
12 truths. So as you go through these 12 truths, ultimately you come out, not, and I understand that you're not going to fully heal in this lifetime, but you're going to come out as good as it can ultimately get for you. You're going to be you're going to realize that transformation.
This is the thing. I don't know if you're familiar with the symbol of the centaur, half animal, half human, from mythology.
Oh yes.
Okay, so the centaur represents us. We are animals. The end of the day, we are animals. That is the significance of the praecipe, the manger. Praecipe means manger in Latin, the beehive cluster, and why Jesus was born in a manger surrounded by animals. Our low-level consciousness is animalistic. We will meet our needs, grab food, grab breath, grab thirst, drink, no matter what. So when we go through this process, we stop hating ourselves and betraying ourselves because we have low-level nature, a physical body that's impure. And we actually start to enjoy the body as the divine vehicle that it is. So I no longer mistreat my body, but rather I purify it. I do Ayurvedic cleansing rituals, or I eat well, or I drink and hydrate, or I exercise. And you start to take care of the vehicle that is the source of the impurity. The wound is never healed. It's simply accepted. And you're actually quite grateful because it gave you your path. So the metaphor of the centaur is we're half animal and we're half human. I don't know if you're familiar with the chakra system, but the third chakra is right at the belly button, where he is still an animal right before he becomes a human, the human part of the centaur. And that third chakra is our crown of jewels, our fire element, our self-worth, our self-love. It's that fire that we talked about before, the passion, the drive, the soul that gets us in this lifetime to do what we came to do. That's located in the lower nature, in the legs, in the lower part of the centaur. It's only in a body that we can do our soul's work. So instead of hating ourselves for being impure and having these deadly sins or whatnot, these thieves of the mind, we actually start realizing that it's the vehicle that mom and dad gave us, because they were the people that allowed us to have a vehicle for our soul. We forgive them as a result, regardless of your relationship with them. This is not about you have to make up with your parents. It's not about this at all. It's all internal. This is all happening in the mind. And then you realize, wow, my body, as impure as it is, houses my divine self. That's how we heal. So you never really heal the wound. It's the drive. But you start to heal because your lower nature and your higher nature are no longer dual, but rather unified, which is the whole purpose of spirituality.
So they begin to merge.
Yes. So I say my earthly Frances and my divine or spiritual Frances get along real well.
Wonderful. That's beautiful. Well, this work sounds really beautiful. And I just want to really thank you for taking your time out to share these insights with us on the Power of Your Mind podcast. I want to have you talk a little bit about your website and the free workbooks and the tools that they can get by accessing your YouTube and your website.
Absolutely. So my website is www.dryahia.com. That's DRYAHIA.com. There is a tab called workbooks. If you're looking for individual shadow work for yourself, there's a 7 Gates workbook. If you're in relationship and struggling, you can do this work with or without your partner, and the truth is in the triangle workbook. If you have children or family structure you want to rearrange, it's called Dethroning Olympus. So I've got tons of workbooks on the website. On my YouTube channel, I run a college of metaphysics, Hidden Truths College of Metaphysics. I have tons of YouTube content. If you're into depth psychology, mythology, universal law, symbology, hours, tons of great information on there about all of my work, all of the steps to spiritual adulting. I have a whole dethroning series where I explain different archetypes, how our mind works, the spiritual significance of COVID, tons of hours of content. Please help yourself. And if you're looking for a session or reading to go deeper, you can actually contact me via my webpage. And the Patreon is a spiritual starter kit. It's actually month by month, you get access to me and a video of one of the 12 truths that helps you sort of step by step start or continue a spiritual practice. And anything you do, religion, philosophy, or tradition that you're already doing fits in, because all religions, traditions, and philosophies say the same thing. So I just sort of put it in a 12 truths model, and you can plot in what you're already doing and then fill in the gaps.
Wonderful. And then you also have your book on Amazon as
And I
well.
do the 7 Gates, 7 Steps Beyond Self-Awareness, and Witch Bitch Ceremonies and Rituals for Gods and Goddesses. And I have a few books coming out later this year as well.
Ooh, wow. Well, you have definitely opened up and expanded the awareness of our audience here in a really deep, beautiful, profound way. So I really want to thank you for that. And I think, there's a lot to learn about this. And so you just kind of gave us the tip of the iceberg here.
Yes.
And I can tell that this work that you do is very profound. So thank you very much for doing the work that you do. Thank you, listeners, for being here and listening to the Power of Your Mind podcast. And thank you once again for being on the show.
Thank you, Victoria. It was a pleasure.